Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation ascension guide and originator of Trinity Energy Progression. So let's talk, or should we? today's idea of discussion, because we've been looking a lot. I've been looking a lot this week on how to. Hold on a second. I'm going to see if I can get myself up here because last time I didn't get any. There we go. There we go. Good morning, Sarah. Yeah, so I have to pull up my phone today so I can see comments and people coming in, because for some reason on my computer it does not show me this. Anyway, so let's get on to today's topic. There has been a lot coming up about translation lately, and one of the things that it's really a challenge to put words to, because it's about doing it without words. And we get to this place of we have so much going on, right? We have so much dependence on words that we forget that words are simply a translation of energy and knowing, okay? So that's the simplicity of it. I could pretty much hang up here and be done with it. But what's really important to look at on another level, though, is that we think we're so dependent on it that we're blind to it, right? So right now we're going through this whole process of shifting, and we're stepping through this huge doorway, even if we don't have this conscious understanding, remembrance of what that is. But we are collectively moving right now into this really expansively different place. And so we're getting called to put in front of us all the things, all the crumbs that are holding us back, that we're blind to, right? So then we say, well, how are we blind to them? If we're blind to them, how can we see them? How can I see that? Good morning, Anne. So it comes up to punches in the face pretty much right now, because there's like no hesitation. We're past the moment of hesitation. We're past using hesitation or distractions as distractions, right? Because and what I'm talking about in distractions is we have crises and chaos, and we have things that we know the ego will be distracted by, right? And so then we think, and the ego puts great importance on, and we say, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this. I can't do this, or I have to do this. And then we get distracted, or why is this not happening? Why? And so we get distracted on all these things, right? And words are some of the biggest things we get distracted by, because then we get so hung up on, are the words proper to convey the meaning? Well, what's really interesting is what I teach, what I understand, and what many of us do are more consciously practicing, is remembering that this whole multiverse is all about energy and divine consciousness, the energy of divine consciousness, and that everything in creation is just a creation and duality and separation from that energy. So therefore the energy is first, right? Or even the energy is there for creation. And when we get into creation mode, then we start putting things in separation. And so interestingly, I can't remember, I think it's the Hindu belief system that talks about that the whole universe was created with the word Om, right? Which is why it's used in chants and meditations and stuff like that. So, but the word had to come before, like the word was the first creation, right? That's the thing that we forget. And that any words that we create are just creation from energy that's already there, okay? So this is really a challenging thing, and this is something that keeps on coming up, right? And I'll get to why this is and how this is relevant and easy to translate, because we don't want to translate it every day. So we give meaning to things, right? We give meaning to them, or we don't give meaning to them. That's duality, okay? When we get to this place of remembering existing in unconditional love, existing as the divine in being, then we remember how to do things and create things from being, and not get to a place of being from doing, because that's sort of backwards. It's going out to come back in versus just starting in and then emanating out. So what's happening is this. And I've talked about this on other occasions because this is a great example. When I first left corporate, I started this organic nursery, right before I got into this work, an organic herb nursery. And so when I was learning how to do commercial organics, I spoke with other growers that were commercially, organic and organically certified, whatever. And some of them who had been doing it for years. And what I remember one of them said to me one time when we had this conversation, he said, what happens is with many, when you switch over from conventional to organic, the first thing is you try to fit like a square box into a round hole, or square peg into a round hole, because we often will just take the ideas from conventional, gardening or growing into organics, but they're just two completely different realities. And he said that was an important thing to remember. And he said, so like at first what you want to do is because conventional is all about reactive stuff, and oh my gosh, I got to take care of this now, and I have to control this, I have to change it, I have to force it. And he said, and then you go into that in organics, and that doesn't really work for long term. So what you do then is you think the same thing, except then you use organic products or OMRI listed products. And he said, but really in the long term, you'll realize that it's just a completely different way of seeing things, because it's allowing nature to be integrated as it's meant to be. And so when you really are true in the way of organic gardening or growing or whatever, you get to this whole place where you realize that if I'm patient, right, and I pay attention to the quality of the soil, I pay attention to what the plants are telling me because they speak as conscious beings themselves, which is funny because this was talking spiritual stuff with people, but this was a very practical conversation with a commercial grower. And he said, and you listen to the plants because they'll tell you what's off. Because really organics in its true nature is to be its natural integrated self, like what the earth intends it to be. And so when you do that, it becomes far more, in the short term, it's a little more stressful, but in the long term, it becomes a lot easier, because then you're allowing the energies to integrate, right? So you plant things together because they naturally are compatible. They naturally help each other. Like there's something called companion planting, where you plant a certain plant next to another because it actually detracts bugs that would eat the other plant naturally, and yet then it enhances each other's flavor. So and I used to do classes on companion planting once I sort of got the hang of it. So that's really important in terms of spirituality too. So what we tend to do is we are in this place in duality and separation and words, right? We're in this very focused place of controlling and creating these pictures, right, to communicate externally. We've forgotten how to just connect here. When we connect here, we stop needing to make it external to bring it internal. We simply are being in that connection and oneness. And then things like what we talk about as telepathy become completely effortless. It's a completely different way of going about it. So what happens is we get into the spiritual stuff, right? We get into psychic work, intuitive work, energy work, frequency work, whatever. And we want to put these words into things. We want to use tools, which words are included in, these external tools to convey the energies, because we believe we're still not fully convinced that we're the ones who are creating this, right? So what happens is we then create more words, we create more rituals, we create more ceremony, we create more things that we say you have to do or you can't do. And that's moving into that from the standard of judgment and right, believing right and wrong, there's a right way and a wrong way, or you have to do this, or you can't do this, or you're forbidden to this, or you must do this, or you mustn't do that. And that's where we get into a challenge, right? Or you have to see things this way, or you have to do things this way, right? So, and the point I'm getting to is this: when in the end of the day, right? When we talk about healing work, right, being healers and whatever, the only person who really heals us is ourself, right? So we've come to this place of believing externally that somebody else can heal us, that we have to be healed, that we have to go outside of us, that somebody else has more information, because that's just the practice. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just now it's time to remember that this is actually all just an externalized reflection back into what I'm doing, inside of me, that I'm allowing inside of me. So what I tell people when they come to see me is, well, I'm basically somebody who helps to facilitate you to resolve stuff within you that you have not yet remembered how to resolve within yourself. So that you have not yet remembered how to access these certain frequencies of energy. I help you to remember that, because I don't do it for you. I actually just help you remember, like in sitting. And what we ultimately do is we go out and we step out of our separation into our oneness, so that I can help in the energy where I sit for you to remember how to access that yourself, and then change whatever it is in the creation that you're being blocked in, to change on your own. Now, in reality, there's no words that go on in that. Like, we simply are energy, and that's shifting and focusing our energy in intentional creation. Okay. And that is pure. That is pure to what we are, beyond all these expectations and judgments and hierarchy and what's the word I'm looking for? Where's the word? Like, hierarchy is one of them. But it's all about the way we externalize to internalize. We externalize thinking somebody else has the power that we don't, except we do have all the power. And so we give it to, so then what happens? We go into spiritual world. And what do? We give it to angels, archangels, ascended masters. We give it to others who we believe are gurus when we don't believe that of ourselves. We give it to others who have written books or had certain experiences, and we make them into a hierarchy of what's more important, or who's more important or better or worse, whatever. And we judge based on that. Oh, well, go and see, you should go and see this person because they're this. And then really, though, I'm that too. And so are you. It's a matter of remembering how to do that. And yes, can we use each other as conduits of remembrance? Absolutely. That's what we're here for. Like, we're here to reflect different things back to ourselves, right? With each other. But we're so used to going through these steps of things like words and concepts and creating a decoration, what I call decoration, and saying, okay, so ultimately when somebody comes to me and they say, well, I want to meet my guides, I'm like, okay, but look in the mirror because you're your guide. Okay, so we can allow ourselves certain pooled energy to be a reflection in a certain face of, say, a guide, right? Whether we want to call it an angel, an archangel, an ascended master, whatever. And that's great. That's like a baby step, because then after that, eventually, is to get to the point of realizing that it's you who does that it's you who's reflecting back to you in just a different face, that helps you to understand and remember these things within yourself that you're not yet you haven't yet been allowing yourself to remember. So that's like another big step, right? Is getting to that place of recognizing that all the messages that are coming to us from outside are actually reflected back to us from what's inside, which means that all the answers are already in there. It's a matter of how we block ourselves from getting them. And so then what happens is this, right? So, okay, that's another huge step for us to take. And then we take on that power. We allow ourselves that self-responsibility in creation and stuff. And then we still have little glitches, and we're like, so what's that about? So the glitches, then, this is the new thing that I've been looking at this week that's been with other friends and colleagues and peers and whatever, have been about the next step beyond just our like being able to take that self-responsibility, is also then getting out of our own way, right? And getting out of our own way, that is really important. Like, so, and this is a completely new level of mastery, right? This is what we're asking ourselves to do, or we're pushing ourselves to do, which is getting to this place where we're saying, I can be, right? And I can understand my guide and know my guidance from my higher self. And I don't have to translate it in my head. So think about that for a minute. When we translate things in our head, so like we automatically we get impressions, right? And knowing. And so like I talk to people all the time about how when they learn and they come and they're like, oh, I want to learn telepathy. I want to, develop my intuitive skills. I want to work on my clairvoyance, my clairaudience, any of the clairs. And I always say, well, be aware that actually getting to a place of knowing, good morning, Namala. When we get to a place of knowing, we surpass all of those other, what we call abilities. Okay. So we get past this place of like thinking, oh, I have to be clairvoyant, or, oh, that's better to be clairvoyant. Oh, you're more clairvoyant than I am, and all this kind of stuff. And we judge based on like who can do what and who can't do what. We think somebody being able to do it, we think that somebody being able to do it makes them better than us, right? Instead of saying, okay, well, maybe our skills are just different. And people say that to me all the time. Oh, well, I can't see like you do, or I can't do this. And I'm like, but it doesn't matter, because what is really, really important is for us to get to the place of saying, I know all this, right? So think about knowing. So when we talk about knowing, people ask me what that means. And knowing is like this. When we're sitting here, right, interacting in some way, shape, or form. You're sitting here in a room. So I'm sitting here in a room. I am in a chair, right? I have clothes on. I have a certain temperature around me. And I'm not consciously thinking, oh, it's 73 degrees. And I have, this kind of cotton on my skin and it feels like this. And, oh, I feel like this chair feels a little hard, or it feels just right. And then I can feel the hardness of this, and I can smell the sense of breakfast coming in from another room. Like, we don't really usually consciously think of that stuff. We just know it, right? We're just sort of present in our room most of the time. We're just present in our room. Well, actually, many of us are focusing on just how to remember how to be present in that way, in this wholeness, right? So that would be, to me, a very 3D knowing, okay? And so when we really expand our consciousness back to within, to allowing ourselves to be the divine that we are, and to know that we have all the answers, the more we let go of the need to have these specific skills, right? The need to say, oh, I need to be able to be clairvoyant, I need to do this, I need to do that. The more we just know, okay? So when I train people, like the practice that I originated, Trinity Energy Progression, this is like a big practice that focuses, many people ask me what it really does. I'm like, it really focuses on helping people to leapfrog over all these intermediary phases of having to learn this and this and this and then this and this and this, and just get to that knowing and being able to trust it, because that is sometimes the hardest thing within us, right? Is to trust, because it's really easy. Once we get the mind out of the way, once we get all of the judgments, the chattering, the projections, it should be like this, it shouldn't be like that. Once we get all that out of the way, we already know, right? So what happens many times, and I always tell people after, say when I teach the Trinity class, is, so the biggest learning curve is now in implementing this into your life. And I promise you, this is what's going to happen. It is going to be so easy for you in shifting your consciousness that you are going to doubt yourself. You're going to doubt that it's valid. You're going to doubt that you're valid, that this is real, and all that kind of stuff. And that's really what the retraining of yourself is. The learning curve is to say, oh, wait, no, I actually knew that. Many times we already, like, what's so funny is in the beginning, like of practicing this knowing and this presence, right? And this trust and self-responsibility and creation, we already know all of everything, and then we talk ourselves out of it, because part of the game has been to put ourselves in lack. So good morning, Sandy. So when we do that, so like when we take away that intermediary step of needing to externalize to come back inside, we doubt ourselves because it's so easy. And I used to call it, Sandy, my friend Sandy, who's on here, she knows when I used to come out there in Dallas and teach, and we used to call it, I literally went to Staples and bought an easy button, and I would say, see how easy that was, because this isn't complex. Being spiritual and being aware and embodying and stepping into your own divine power it's the easiest thing ever. It's getting out of our own way and shutting down all the things that we cause to block ourselves from doing that. And so the more we allow it to be easy, the easier it becomes. So then what's funny is, because then I am so comfortable in this, and I'm so comfortable in my own knowledge and so self-aware on what, oh, Sandy says, yes, I still have the easy button. Right. And in fact, it was really funny because I did something yesterday where I just looked at my husband and I said, look, there it was. That was easy. Right. Because we can create so easily. What we do create so easily, we just talk ourselves out of it. We prevent ourselves from doing it because A, we think it's supposed to be harder, or B, we don't believe we have the power to do it or the permission or whatever. And C, that we feel like we have to learn it from other people. We have to learn it, or we have to get it from other people, right? We have the channeling thing, and people think, oh, well, my guidance is great, but channeling's even better. And I'm like, no, it's the other way around. Channeling's great, but your guidance is even better. Your guidance is always going to be true to you and your journey. And anytime channels come in from somebody else, and it's not a bad thing. I always think, well, it's always great to hear. Sometimes it's a reminder of things we can't remember ourselves. But the thing that we always forget to do is checking in against our own knowing to say, so is that correct in its energy for me, right? And I want to say translation in its translation for me, because that's where we tend to fall short, is the idea of that something being translated into us is really important, because we need to have it translated into our language. But here's the thing. Think of like even playing the game telephone, right? In the same language and 5 people, and how those messages change like that, right? Now change languages, change it to light language, change it to a universal whatever, change it to like, go, say you had those 5 people and they spoke a different language all along the way. That's really what happens with channeling, because how I communicate to you what I see is based on my own filter of my journey, being that I have certain words that I use, I have certain vernacular that I use because of my training or education or experience. And so you might not have the same thing, but you might have a different perception of the same thing that I might have a completely different picture of. And how I tell people that is this, like, so say I see red for you. And so to me, my personal experience in red is that, it's a high vibration of love and vibrance and all that kind of stuff. And to you, red might be angry. And so say, like, I'm working with you and I see red and I say, oh, well, there's a lot of red and, oh, that's all love and whatever. And then you're just, but yet it actually was to show you like where you're angry about something or whatever. And then I've now mistranslated it based on my own filter. Okay. Well, then then many people will just take that suggestion because they think, oh, well, you're the seer, you're whatever. And so you can see it better than I can. And so that's where we get misguided, right? And this is where we sort of, like have like these wiggly paths. And I always say, well, what's really important is not to translate, and when we're working together, right, to just simply state something that you see or feel or understand, to say, well, I see this, I see red. What does red mean to you? What does that feel like to you? If I see red in this area, what does that possibly mean to you? What does red mean to you? Instead of me telling you what red means, it's important for you to understand that you're giving the messages. Good morning, Gloria. You're giving the messages to yourself, or getting the messages for yourself. But as soon as we put words to it, like, so that's a big clear filter, right? But as soon as we put words to something too, we're also translating. And so in our minds, so when we even get past all this and we do get to this place of trust, which is really rare and something that we're constantly focusing on, right? Is the biggest thing is the worthiness, that I have all that power, that I have all that ability, that I have all the knowledge, right? And when we get there, the next step is to stop translating in our heads, right? And you're saying, well, what do you mean? Or the ego says, what are you talking about? When we get impressions or understandings or knowings, right? Going back to what I was talking about a couple minutes ago with the knowings, we then try to translate it into a relative, everyday, practical thing, what we call practical, what the ego, the mind, calls practical. So sometimes we even mistranslate within ourselves, because then we try to put words to it and we believe we have to for it to be valid guidance. When we always know energy, going back to where I started in the beginning of this today, is that at the beginning of the day, it's all energy. It's the energy of whatever you want to call it, source, God, divine consciousness, the universe. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's all the same thing. And so if it's all energy before anything, then the best, most pure way for us to know and remember is energy. And we're getting there. We're working on that. We're playing around with it, right? So there's been a big expansion in things like sound healing, right, and sound baths and all different kinds of frequency healings, which are actually really powerful if we allow it. But what happens is sometimes we talk ourselves out of it because it's that simple. Again, it goes back to simplicity, not complexity. So when we say things like, oh, that felt good, and the thing is, but I still have this, and this, right? But if we allow ourselves to let go of the words and we allow ourselves to immerse into the frequency, it becomes a very powerful thing. It's what we allow within ourselves. And eventually it's for us to get to the place of recognizing that we have that frequency. We have all frequencies within us. So what's really important then is then to just trust the frequency, to even just trust the energy before the frequency of, I am the whole. I am whole. And so I know the big picture and I trust it and I allow it. And when an energy that pushes me a certain way, so I don't even want to, so we can call it guidance, right? But if you just are in a place and you are pushed to do something or say something or create words or create a frequency or create an energy, and we are true to the energy behind it, and we don't translate what that's supposed to be, what I'm supposed to do, what am I supposed to do, how am I supposed to say this, and all that kind of stuff. And we really step back and say, I just trust, because your higher self has the bigger picture, and it's you, it's not anybody else, it's you and me. And we're the same. So the higher we go in terms of concentric consciousness, as I see it, the more unified it becomes, and we see the whole shebang. Right. And so part of the fun now in the game is to allow ourselves to expand and be that and trust and let go of the control, which is control, there's the yawn, of that shifting. Let go of the control of words, of tasks, of rituals, of having to do things a certain way, of believing, and remember that these are beliefs. And if we hold it as beliefs, we will create that as true. So if we believe that we have to trust a ritual, we believe that we have to externalize our stuff to somebody else giving me guidance or channeling, or to even an angel, an archangel, ascended master, then we're going to have that to be true, right? And it's funny because there's a story I tell about, there's somebody that I knew for a while who, when she and I met, it was like an instant recognition, and we kept on asking each other, like, how we met in a class one time, and we were like, how do we know each other? And we had completely exclusive circles of life, right? And so we ended up naturally working very well together. We used to do, we would help each other and and helping ourselves. And I would help her with some of the classes she taught. And she would teach, and she would say things. She would talk about how she didn't trust guidance for a really long time, because one time she was out there and she saw these two angels sitting on a cloud, and they were laughing at the humans. And so she felt very, deceived and everything else. This is this externalization, something could be outside of us. And so she just mistrusted, having guidance or seeing any faces of the divine or aspects of the divine. And So it did drive her to go inside and really get pure into that whole divine consciousness thing. But it still held her in a limitation that she wouldn't allow herself to see things in certain faces or facets or whatever. So fast forward, I mean, and she would say this in her classes or whatever. And so then she took my class, and yeah, we just worked together really well for a long time. And I remember one time I was in meditation, like this is probably a couple of years later, and I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden I see these two angels sitting on a cloud, and I zoom in. And I was like, oh, the two angels are she and I. And we're not laughing at humans, we're laughing at ourselves, embodied as human, and imploring and asking questions to us, thinking that we're anything separate than ourselves. And that's what we thought was hysterical. We thought it was so funny. God, isn't it so funny how we set this up? Yada, yada, yada. In this separation dual universe. And I love that example. And I remember going back to her and saying, oh, it's so funny. Just so when we were IMing each other or PMing each other, and I said, so the whole thing with the angels, let me just tell you, go and ask if the angels are you and me. And there was this hesitation, and then she comes back, she goes, yes. And I said, yeah. And then I told her what I had seen and understood. And it's like, wow, that changes the whole energy, right? Because the translation changed, the perspective changed, right? And then all of a sudden it was like really funny, because that's what we do. We say, okay, oh, look at that person, and that person can't be me, but we're all the same consciousness and energy that's just divided up into pretend illusion, in the pretend illusion of division. So the point is this: the words, be cautious with your words, right? Be cautious with the words that go on in your head, even more so than the ones that are coming through in translation through others and stuff like that. Set yourself to listen to the energy, to pay attention to, not listen, but to feel the energy, and it's pure. Thanks, Sandy. Sandy says, I still love this story. I know, it's a great story. It was a great example. But set yourself to recognize the energy before you even before even trying to translate it into words, and to know what the energy is and the flow that it's creating for you, if you don't get in your own way by trying to translate it as an inner step. So that's it seems very finite, and it's very refined, and it really is. And it's just going to take us a little practice to remember how to do that. I'm going through that right now, because I had something come up even yesterday that got me all triggered, and it was like really weird how it triggered me and stuff. And so it was just a matter of, wow, well, like, look at all that chattering going on, and it's like, okay, and all I kept on getting, like, the feeling was, go back into the energy. Like, instead of like listening to all this chatter and this judgment and all this kind of stuff, go back into the energy. What's the energy here? And let's just clear the path, essentially. And as we even do that in steps, and we clear out the words, and we do that in steps more and more, it becomes a natural thing for us. So look at that this week. And again, it's a very different perspective. It's a very different way to observe and practice. But listen to when you know something. So if you feel adept at listening to your guidance, then when the guidance is there, when you can feel it, because we know how it feels when it comes in, instead of like the mind trying to latch on and trying to translate right away, just feel it and know that you know it, because knowing is much bigger than the words. Knowing is remembering, and remembering is before the creation of the words and translation and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is a really new, and like I said, it's like a next level of mastery in terms of remembrance. But this is going to just take us a little bit of practice. So that's your home play for this week. Just be very aware of that, because I'm being very conscious of it myself. And we'll see what it takes us next week. So thank you for joining me. Have a great week. This is Angela Coulter signing off on this week's Living the Shift. Have a good one.